Okay, so let's get started. Hi everyone, my name is Courtney Fisher. I am the Assistant Director of the American Indian Foods Program, and we will have a question and answer portion of the webinar after the presentation, so please enter your questions into the chat box and we can get your questions answered at the end of the presentation. Our presentation today is Food Labeling International Standards. I would like to introduce Quentin Gray, President and CEO of Q Gray and Associates, a consulting business that helps companies and organizations market food products around the world. He's the former agriculture counselor at the U.S. Consulate in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and former agricultural trade officer at the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where he advised U.S. companies on how to market their food products in the Middle East. Now, Quentin, let us know about food labeling and international standards.
Oh, thank you, Courtney. And as with our previous webinars, I want to make this webinar as informative and practical as possible. And you look at my map. I just put this map up here because this will sort of give us a visual of how we are working with different organizations around the world. Because food labeling, and what you're going to hear me say is I'm going to talk about two things. One, food labeling, of course, but the second one is I'm going to talk about certifications, because the two go hand in hand, because you have to get the certification requirements done correctly. Even, I would say in some ways, that's even more important than the labeling itself. And I'll explain later what I mean by that. But every country has different requirements, and that's something you have to understand, even if you're dealing with the same region. Let's say, for example, in United Arab Emirates or the UAE, you have requirements, and Saudi Arabia, you have different requirements. But those two countries, along with 5 other countries, are part of what's called the Gulf Cooperation Council. And the Gulf Cooperation Council is physically located in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And so for every product that's imported to the Middle East, there are somewhat common standards that are established by what we call the GCC, to make it short. And those standards apply to all products, whether they be agricultural or commercial, health, construction standards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The GCC actually gets together on a regular basis to come up with common standards for all of the countries in the GCC. And the other countries are, in addition to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, is Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Oman. Those countries form the GCC, and they have similar labeling requirements for all the countries, but they may differ slightly. And this is what I'll explain going forward. And then you have the same situation with the ASEAN countries in Asia. You have certain countries that are band together and they trade as a bloc. And so what they do is they establish somewhat common criteria for their labeling and also for their certifications. And so to break this down and to make it as practical as possible, I'm going to talk now about the main players involved in the labeling and certification. As the map indicated, there are different parties that are engaged in the process of coming up with labeling requirements and coming up with certification documentation for exporters. The most important is the foreign government labeling and certification requirements. Because if you're going to export any product, you have to know what their requirements are. If you want to export to Saudi Arabia, you want to export to the UAE, you have to know what their requirements are. But before you do that, before you export anything anywhere, there are certain bodies or organizations, government organizations in the United States that will actually be issuing the certificates. Know what I'm talking about, certificates and not labels. But as I said, they both go hand in hand. But if you don't get the certification part right, forget about the labeling, because because your product could get held up in country. So the main bodies in the United States government that are in charge of issuing export certificates is the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, and the Department of Commerce. Those are the organizations that are in charge with issuing export labeling for the most part, almost all commodities. In March of 2019, I organized for the State Department of Agriculture a sweet potato trade mission to Dubai. And it sounds sort of funny, but if you're in North Carolina, sweet potato is a big business. 70% of the sweet potatoes produced in the United States are produced in North Carolina. And so sweet potatoes is a big deal. And it's my home state. So, you know, it's a big deal for us. And so when I organized that trade mission to go to Dubai, there were companies already exporting North Carolina sweet potatoes to Dubai. So that part we gotten over the tough part, but they were being flown in to Dubai. And the end sweet potato is very expensive, but North Carolina sweet potatoes are so sweet and they're so good, people will pay a lot of money to buy them. And so that's one of the reasons why they're sold quite easily over there. And so the team that went over was comprised of two main companies. One was the company that was already exporting, and the other company was one that wanted to start exporting. And then there were others on the trade mission, but those are the two main players in the trade mission. And the company that's already exporting to Dubai, when we were in our meeting at the Office of Agricultural Affairs, they said, you know, they talked about the problems they had at the beginning of their trying to ship the sweet potatoes to Dubai, and how they lost shipments because of the certification problems they were having, and that the product was being held by the government, the Dubai municipality. And so one of the persons in the meeting, Fairuz Zagul, who used to work for me, she said, "Why didn't you contact us?" And the company that it was exporting basically didn't know that the USDA has offices around the world. And I was one of those officers. I used to head the office in Dubai. And what she was saying, what Fairuz was saying, if you had called us, we could have called the government in a body, which was the Dubai municipality, and we perhaps could have gotten that product released. Because sometimes in international certifications and labeling, but certifications I'm talking about right now, sometimes all the information is there. It's just not put in the format that, let's say, the Dubai municipality is used to receiving. So if we can go in, and I've done this so many times in my career, I've gone into the government official's office and I take the certificate out and I'll say, it's the same. It's just worded differently. Sometimes it's a simple explanation. I've gotten a lot of shipments released because of that. Because sometimes it's a matter of being able to understand that we're presenting you the same information. We just don't present it in the way that you're accustomed to receiving it. So anyway, that was what we told the US company that was there for that trade mission, that you need to use the resources that are overseas, because those folks are over there and they know how to work with the people who are in the government organizations overseas. And so this is more explanation of the kinds of what I've done here is I've gone through each of the main certifying agencies and what they certify. So any product that is inspected and covered by the Food and Drug Administration, that the Food and Drug Administration will issue export certificates for those products. For example, if you're exporting a food product that's not meat, dairy, and poultry that's covered by U.S. Department of Agriculture, then the USDA can offer what's called a certificate of free sale, and or either a certificate to a foreign government that actually will serve as an export certificate for certain products. And the FDA covers certificates for different foods, food additives, food substances, also certificate of free sale for dairy supplements, dietary supplements, etc., and also certificates for cosmetic products. Whereas USDA, for the most part, we're dealing with excuse me, meat products, also dairy products, honey, eggs, and even alcoholic beverages. And so you can go to the links that are in this presentation that the AIF staff will provide you my presentation, I hope. And you can go to those links and you can go in there and they'll give you specific information about the certificates that USDA offers for products that are being exported overseas. And then this is for the Department of Commerce. Department of Commerce is handling mostly seafoods, which is a big item for American Indian companies. And so they are the organization that is going to provide the export certification for seafood. Seafood's a little bit, I don't want to say strange, but it's very, it's one of the items we don't cover or we didn't cover at USDA, but it's a very important that you understand that seafood certification differs depending on where the fish comes from. If it's farm-raised catfish, certain seafoods are covered by USDA because it's not really seafood, it's farm-raised fish. And that will be covered by USDA, whereas fish that's actually caught in let's say, streams and waters and oceans, etc., is covered by Department of Commerce. But when you go to Department of Commerce and in a map or one of my slides, you'll see the breakdown. That's one of my slides that's coming later. You'll see a breakdown as to who covers what. And here it is. I should have not wasted my time. So this diagram explains which body covers what. And whether it's a freshwater seafood, marine seafood, products from fish oil, etc. So this breaks down as to who covers what in terms of certification agency. This is a very important chart. It didn't come out that clear, but I think that we all can read it. So this tells you exactly who to go to. And then for pet food, for example, or ornamental brood stock, etc., research animals, it goes to APHIS, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, and then pet foods is Animal Plant Health Inspection Service. They're on the bottom. And for meat and poultry, this is the Food Safety Inspection Service, and USDA actually, they have all the information on the international requirements for any importing country in the world. So you go on the USDA website or the FSIS website, and then you can find in that website which part of USDA, which person in the FSIS is handling meat and poultry. Okay, now let's switch a little bit from certification to actually the topic of the presentation, labeling. As I said earlier, each country has its own labeling requirements. So you have to go to each, you have to find out what they are. But as I said, labeling requirements are similar depending on which region you're exporting to, for example, the Middle East. And for any country in the world, you can go to the USDA website, and which I'll have all the links later in the presentation. And you can go into USDA website and go into the countries and regions, and you'll find out how to get in contact with people in the offices of agricultural affairs. And they can send you, in a matter of seconds, all of the latest regulations with respect to whatever food you want to export. Because our offices overseas routinely keep up with those sorts of things. And the good news, boy, my build up. Oh, I'm moving too fast. But at any rate, the good news, which is going to come in another slide, is that in most cases, you don't have to worry about your label that you use in the United States, because most countries will accept your labels in the United States. As long as they are approved in the US, most countries will approve them. And what your company will have to do is to put a sticker on. Now, that's a good thing, but you still have to adhere to certain requirements, even if you have a sticker. So if you're exporting to the Middle East, you have to have Arabic labeling, sticker, Arabic labeling or Arabic sticker. I've never heard of a company that's exporting from the United States that actually makes an Arabic label, because it's too expensive and it's not necessary. But companies normally will have a sticker with Arabic, everything written in Arabic. But it has to have the production expiry dates, have to be clearly printed. The shelf life of the product has to be listed. And then there are other specifics. You can't make any product claims like lowering cholesterol, etc. You have to have a certificate of health required for all products. And right now, that's a comment that shelf life issues have eased considerably, new standards. Now, those requirements apply to any country you export to, for the most part, in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, to give you an idea of how things differ, has the same requirements as the UAE, except for a few points that are different. They're very important points to know. There has to be, Saudi Arabia has banned poultry, stunning in poultry and livestock. And the issue of feeding animal protein to livestock is a very, very tricky and important issue. The stunning issue for poultry it gives a good example of how the UAE, for example, and Saudi Arabia differ. Saudi Arabia says you cannot use electrical stunning. The UAE officially and in the books will tell you the same. But in practice, the UAE allows the stunning, but they don't acknowledge it. So that puts the producer in a strange predicament. It's accepted and widely accepted, but it's not official law, because it would take an act of, or they say in the United States, an act of Congress in order to change the regulation, because it's tied to religion. It would take an act of a monumental act in order to get the government of the UAE to change its regulation to say it allows stunning. When I was there 4 or 5 years ago, when I was agriculture counselor in Dubai, the government, part of the government that deals with these issues, said that they were going to try to change the regulations to allow for what they call electrical immobilization. Electrical immobilization is the same as stunning, but it's a different name. So they were going to try to pass legislation that would allow stunning, but at an approved level. The whole stunning gets into the issue of humane treatment of the animal, when you slaughter the animal, etc., whether the animal is still alive once once the animal is slaughtered, that sort of thing. There are some who believe that the stunning actually relaxes the animal and produces a higher quality product. There are others who believe that you should never stun the animal. I mean, you can go and you can debate this one for like forever, and there's no consensus, even in the Islamic world, on stunning versus stunning. I always say in a heartbeat, you shouldn't stun, blah, blah. But then when you bring to their attention that almost all the meat that you're eating has been stunned, then they basically clamp up and blah, blah. So anybody who's been exporting to the Middle East has been going through this problem. So in terms of the livestock issue in Saudi Arabia used to be a big market for U.S. beef. And then we had the mad cow disease that came about. And so as a result, the market dried up overnight. The U.S. market over there dried up overnight. But through a lot of years of work, now the market is available under strict conditions. And that is that the animal should not have been fed any animal, certified that the animal has not been fed any animal protein. And there's a whole process through the AMS export verification program that I mentioned here, where you find the regulations for that. The market is there, but the cost of certifying the beef that the animal has not yet been fed animal protein is very expensive. And it's made U.S. beef almost not competitive in the Saudi market, unless the situation changes. In the UAE, that's not a problem. You can export to the UAE anytime, and you don't have to worry about getting that certification. So this is just an example of how you have to be very careful as to the certification and the labeling differs from country to country, even in the same region. And as I said, the good news. Oh, even better news than the good news is that most large supermarkets, they actually ask for quotes for product to be sent to their US consolidators. So for example, Lulu's is one of the largest supermarket chains in the Middle East. And Lulu's opened up its warehouse in New Jersey about 4 or 5 years ago. So what Lulu's is going to ask you to do is going to ask you to give a quote for shipping the product from your location to its facility in New Jersey. But all of the requirements I talked about, certifications, labeling, putting on the Arabic stickers, which I'm sure there are companies that do that for your company, will do that for your company at a fee. All of that has to be done when the product is shipped to their warehouse. Spinneys is another very large supermarket chain in the Middle East, and they have their consolidator in California. So everything is relatively, it's not that difficult to export to the Middle East. And Asian countries, other Asian countries have the same thing. They have ways for you to get the product. And the offices of agricultural affairs overseas will be able to give you that information in terms of where the consolidators are located. But you still have to work with Lulu's in Dubai, for example, or Spinneys in Dubai in order to talk to the buyers. But the buyers are located overseas. They're not the consolidators, they're different. And so when I organized a trade mission last year of buyers from the Middle East, I organized a couple, 2 or 3 of them, of buyers that came over to the United States. They were buyers that were coming here from the big companies in the Middle East, like Lulu's and Spinneys, And then we had some of the other companies in other countries other than the UAE. We had, no, just step back. We had companies that came over from the UAE, Spinneys, for example, and then we had a big company called Goodies that sent the representative. Goodies is located in Saudi Arabia, and then we had I think it was a company out of either Oman or Qatar. It was Qatar. We had another company that a big grocery store chain representative that came over for one of the trade missions. And then we had similar composition of trade missions that came over from other countries and in the same region. So at any rate, you have to deal with those companies, but in terms of when you ship, they're going to ask you to quote sending to their consolidators. Now, USDA, Department of Agriculture, as I said, they have offices around the world, not in every country like the Department of State, but in the major exporting markets. Those companies, those offices are located. We have an office in Dubai, you have one in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, you have, of course, Japan, you have China, you have Beijing, you have almost every major market in the world has an Office of Foreign Agricultural Affairs. And those offices produce, not every year, but when the situation warrants, what's called a FAIRS report. And that report, as I have it written out here, is the report that actually gives you all of the certifications needed for export to a certain market. For example, if you were to read the FAIRS report that was put out by the Office of Agricultural Affairs in Dubai, they have a FAIRS report, and in that report, they have physical copies of every certificate that you need for the major commodities exported from the United States to that market. So you don't have to guess. They'll tell you exactly what's needed, exactly what's required, and exactly who it comes from. And they don't, and as I said, I think the last time Dubai wrote this report was in 2018, because the regulations and the rules for certification don't change that often. So every 2 or 3 years, they may update the report, but it's going to stay basically the same. And again, this is how you would go about contacting them. This link, www.fes.usda.gov, you will go to that link and regions, and then they will, anywhere in the world where you want to export, they can give you information on what the certifications are. And of course, our good friends at American Indian Foods, Latasia and Courtney, they'll be able to help you as well. And I also put information down that could also be useful is the Western United States Agricultural Trade Association. They're the ones who organized the trade missions that I coordinated last year, along with their help. They did a lot of work, but I was also instrumental in getting the Middle East companies to come on the trade mission. And also another good source would be the U.S. Agriculture Export Development Council. They have good information on exporting. And then I put the information on the Offices of Agricultural Affairs in Saudi Arabia and also Dubai. These are just the offices I've done a lot of work with recently, but you can go, if you're exporting to Mexico, it's the same deal. If you're exporting to Canada, we have offices of agricultural affairs in all of those countries. And almost every main region in the world, we have officers that are posted overseas. And what I've done to make life simple for everybody is I pulled together all the links for the export certification bodies. So for FDA, these are the major people that the major person would be Jeffrey Hammer. You'd want to contact, and then also all of these links will actually get you to the right person to help you with the certification. And in USDA, the same deal. You know, Donald Willer would be able to help you. Also, you can go to these links, and I'm pretty certain they have additional contacts in those links of people you want to talk to. And then for the Commerce Department, the same deal is you go to those links, and then you can get information on what export certificates are required for which country. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm ready to take any questions you might have.
Perfect. So if anybody does have any questions, we can have that question time right now if you want to unmute yourself and ask anything for Quentin. All right, perfect. Well, Quentin's contact information is on the screen, and we did have one request to send out this presentation, so we will definitely do that, and we can send it out to everybody else as well, just because of the amount of links and everything. That would be really helpful for everyone. And our past presentations are all available on our YouTube channel, Indian Ag. I did say that in the chat so that you can see our YouTube username. But yeah, thank you for presenting today, Quentin.
Yeah, and thank you guys so much for dialing in. And I know that you're all so shy. So don't be shy. And if you have any specific questions, you can actually send me that in my email. And I'll be happy to answer as best I can. And if I can't answer your question, I know where to find the answer. That's how long I've been dealing in this area. I can pretty much find an answer for almost anything that you have to ask. So I look forward to hearing from you.